Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
Hey, what's going on all across fantasy land? It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Boy, I'm in a good mood tonight, folks. I'm Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com. I'm joined by my main man, Dwain McFarland. You know his great utilization report. You read it every single week over at Pro Football Focus or EstablishTheRun.com. And guys, it's a great week. Not only did I make a trade about 10 minutes before we went on air, but it's Eagles-Cowboys week. Dwain and I are fired up. We're ready to talk fantasy football with you. The chat room is loaded. Everybody, we appreciate you coming in to talk to us on YouTube or Periscope. However you check out the hustle, welcome in. We're going to talk to you all night long in the chat room. And Dwain, we've got some rest of the season stuff that you have compiled for us. We got a lot of waiver talk, and holy moly, do we got some running back news to get to. But my friend, How are you?
Man, I'm good. I don't think I'm as excited about the Eagles and Cowboys as you are. But, you know, if I was in your shoes, I would be more excited. I don't think the Cowboys can beat anyone. But, you know, I'm happy to be on the show doing it with you, Drake. I'm looking forward to talking week 8.
Ben passed DiNucci to the left-hand side going up against the Eagles defense this week. We'll get to those guys because I pulled off a trade just before the show. I had to get out from under this Cowboys dilemma that I'm in. I have Zeke Elliott, who I'm still trying to trade, if any of my league mates are listening. And I traded CeeDee Lamb away to get Ryan Tannehill. I know none of you guys out there care about my leagues, but I've got a question for Dwain I'll bring up later. And I want the chat room to get involved in this about players setting lineups or not setting lineups. And do they owe the rest of the league kind of a solid to set a lineup? So we'll get into that a little later, though. But where we're going to start is at the running back position. It's in Arizona. They are on bye this week. Usually we don't talk about those teams, but this is a major situation, so we'll touch on it quickly. Kenyon Drake goes down with the ankle injury. Enter Chase Edmonds. We've been telling you for weeks and weeks and weeks to have him on your roster. You should have drafted him if you listened to Dwain and his draft plan info. Last year, the same sort of thing happened. He took over, scored 3 touchdowns. Then he got hurt. So we've got Chase Edmonds. I doubt he relinquishes this role. Deep stash, Eno Benjamin. But Dwain, love to hear your thoughts on the Cardinals as I crack the Pumpkin Nitro. Thank you to the folks who voted out there on our Hustle Twitter page.
Yeah, man. I mean, we've got the team going on by, but as long as Edmonds is going to be in the lineup, you know, which, I mean, he's always in the lineup. He's already, you know, a fringe RB2, which is crazy. You know, just he's so hyper efficient. I mean, I think the thing that we all see is Drake's just out there. It's almost like, I don't know what's going on, but a lot of the elusiveness and burst, everything we saw last year is gone. Either it's something to do with that injury he had in the preseason where he had the boot on. Maybe that never went away. It could also be, you know, he's just being coached to just go hit the hole versus trying to be creative. And then, you know, you watch Edmonds come into the game and it's just like a whole different thing. Now he is seeing lighter boxes in some cases because of when he gets used, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, the guy just has way more juice, Drake, you know, and he's great in the passing game. So, I mean, if for whatever amount of time he gets to play, now you're going to always deal with, you know, Murray taking off running. That eats into your targets to your running backs. It also could potentially take away rushing touchdowns. But still, this is a good offense. They run a lot of plays. They run more no huddle than any other team in the rest of the league. And if he can be involved in the passing game, just some, you know, and then take over some of that work from Kenyon Drake, I think, you know, he's going to have an RB1 upside every week that occurs. And I think the other thing, Drake, is, I mean, if he comes in and does really well, I mean, I don't think that Kenyon Drake at this point is guaranteed to get his job back.
Somebody in the chat room just asked, is Drake droppable? Now, they're treating this as a high ankle sprain. I think he tore a ligament in his ankle. I mean, let's say he comes back in 3-4 weeks. Who knows? These high ankle sprains, we've seen McCaffrey. What's he working on? His 6th week now? So, I mean, you go 6 weeks from now, you're looking at, you know, fantasy playoffs. Do you want to keep this guy on your bench? I know I have this dilemma myself. What do you think?
I think we still need more information to know for sure, you know, how long it's going to be. But if it does end up being, you know, even 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And I'm going to answer two questions with one. Chan Lee had asked, what I mean by medium and larger size leagues when I mentioned that, in my articles. That's a good question. But if I'm in a small league, so that's like an 8-person league, with fairly shallow benches, you may only carry, 4 or 5 players, on your bench. And maybe, you're only starting, one flex player, but you don't have like these really extended, rosters for starters. And that kind of league, I'm fine, Drake. Just, if you want to move on, you can, because guess what? There's better options. There's other options available in those types of leagues. Mm-hmm. If you're in a medium-sized league with short benches, meaning just 3 or 4 folks on the bench, not a ton of extra flex starters, I think it's a coin flip there. You probably can go ahead and move on. Now, if news comes back that it's 4 to 6 weeks, I mean, I'm fine. Just, do what you got to do. And your team, your league, your roster construction, your situation, what you need to do to, if you're sitting at 500 and you're just trying to bring it home and get in this weekend of the playoffs, great. If your team, is undefeated and you're stacked and you can afford to just let him sit, on your bench, great, you can. Mm-hmm. But in a deeper league, which would be, 12 people or more, especially, so like I play in leagues where there are 12 other teams in the league, and we have 20 player rosters, and you're starting 2 flex players. So that is what I would consider, a deep league. Obviously, when you get into the 14-person, 16-team leagues, that's obviously, those are deep leagues too. In those situations, it's going to be tougher to drop Drake unless you just happen to be lucky and be in a league where there's something weird sitting on the wire, because there's just not going to be things that are super enticing to go grab. Right. I mean, now that could change in a week from now. Some things could happen to where there's somebody you're just looking to go grab. Obviously, if Edmonds were available, you would do it for that, in that kind of format. But again, I think it depends, on the league.
All right, so he's your number 1 pick off the wire. Number 2 may be Carlos Hyde, because in Seattle, Chris Carson suffered a midfoot sprain. They call it midfoot. That's a Liz Frank sprain. And I don't care what these guys are saying. Pete Carroll with his, he might play this week. But baloney. He's not playing this week. Like, these guys with these midfoot sprains, they knocked him out for multiple weeks. His timeline's uncertain. So Carlos Hyde's the next man up. He's coming off 1,000 yards in Houston last year, but now he's dealing with a hamstring injury. I stole this from RotoViz's Curtis Patrick. Game splits show us over the last 3 years, when Hyde gets 10 or more carries, he's averaging 13.25 PPR points. So that's fantastic. If he's healthy and he gets that role in Seattle, he's going to be fantastic. DJ Dallas, the rookie 4th rounder out of Miami, could be the sleepiest of sleepers. Seattle's next 3 are San Francisco, Buffalo, and the Rams. So what do you think of this Seattle situation?
Yeah, I mean, Hyde's even available in a lot of the leagues that I play in, which is kind of crazy. He's available in about 40% of those. I am a little bit concerned about Hyde's injury. I'm not going to go crazy, on what I'm going to spend on him, because one, I don't think he gets all of Chris Carson's role. I don't think he'll get some of the passing work that Chris Carson was getting. I think he'll take over the rushing duties, but at the same time, I mean, Chris Carson hasn't been getting 15 to 20 carries, right? These aren't our 2019, 2018, 2017 Seahawks. They're going to drop back. They're going to throw the ball a ton. There's not going to be a lot of carries to go around. So you need to be involved in the passing game. And I think that's really probably going to be more DJ Dallas and even Travis Homer. Now, Travis Homer, I think, showed up as questionable as well, something to do with his knee. I haven't seen anything else about that. Tomorrow is a huge day, right? We get our first, practice report of the week, and it's going to be pretty telling, about Hyde as well as Homer. And so if I'm feeling iffy, about Hyde, I've already started working on my waiver wires tonight, for all of my mid-stake, high-stake teams. I put a bid on DJ Dallas in all 5 teams that I've done so far. So, I mean, and again, I play in really deep leagues, but he's a guy that I'm trying to get on my team, because I agree with you. I think the injury could be for longer than what we're hearing. The positive for Carson is when he got his knee twisted earlier in the season, we thought he was going to be out a while, and he turns around and comes right back. But to your point, this foot sprain thing, man, like anytime I hear like that foot sprain, Jones fracture, any of those things, I'm with you. Like I'd rather hear like, a sprained MCL or something like that, because and maybe I'm wrong, but what it seems like is when the players get these sorts of injuries, Drake, they can't get over them. It's like they think they're back and then they re-injure it. So I think the rehab on these types of injuries are tougher, right? Because you basically, I think you have to stay off of your foot, a lot, so we'll see, what happens with that. But I am definitely, if Hyde's there, I'm willing to put some money on him. And again, you guys know your leagues, but DJ Dallas is the guy that I'm kind of trying to sneak in, Drake.
Exactly. I think he's going to be a guy that goes unclaimed in tons of leagues. And then Thursday, Friday, we start hearing more and more news on Hyde. He might be a guy you snag for free off waivers. You don't even bid on.
Yeah, I mean, Hyde, could be, in trouble this week and then be back the next week. And then DJ Dallas isn't worth as much. You know what I mean? And the Seahawks don't have a great matchup, so don't go wild on the guy, but at the same time, if you're in deeper formats, like DJ Dallas is one of those guys that, again, I'm putting depending on my team, anywhere from 2 to 5%, and there's a couple, one of them, I think I put like almost 10%, but it's like, I've got Chubb's hurt, Eckler's hurt. And then James Robinson, who I have, is on bye. It's just like, I got to have somebody, and Hyde's not available and I need a second back. And it's like, I'm just putting my chip on him.
What do you think of Rashad Penny? Have you heard anything on him? Actually, somebody just asked that in the chat.
Yeah, I haven't. Actually, I had that jotted down as a note to go check on, and I need to look at it. It's definitely not this week that he's back, but I don't know when he's due to return. Actually, I'm looking right now. Let's pull up
he's someone. I mean, people have talked about that injury with Penny, and who knows if this is legit or not, but you hear things like he's not going to be valuable at all this year. It's kind of just a whole
he could
wash,
now,
but who knows,
To be honest, in the offense they're running, he could be the most, if he's recovered, he could be the best fit, Drake, because he's a better receiver than Chris Carson. It's not saying Chris Carson's terrible, but Penny could actually be the best fit for their new offense because he can pretty much do everything they want him to do.
Remember last year, he really came out at the end of last season.
Yeah, he had a blow up game. I remember that, and then he forced basically a 2-way split between him and Carson for a bit, and then he got hurt.
Let's stay in the NFC West, and we'll go to San Francisco, where we saw Jeff Wilson Jr. go bananas, scoring 3 touchdowns on Sunday until he blew a hammy. Now he's on the shelf. So there's an opening, and that opening is for JaMychal Hasty. So he looks shot out of a cannon. This guy, to me, seems like what Shanahan's wettest dreams are made of. You've also got Jerick McKinnon, who was basically boxed out this past week, and they didn't use him. This is like the NBA with their load management. They're like, oh, we're just giving him some rest. Rest? What are you talking about? The guy's been played in 2 years. It's week 7. Their next 3 games are at Seattle, Green Bay, and New Orleans. So if Hasty's out there and he's the guy for a week or two, how many chips are you putting on him? And do you think they're going to give him the keys to the kingdom?
I have no clue. I don't. I'm with you. He looks like the guy I would think they would want in. Not last week, but the week before. If you remember, at the end of that game, I was in a showdown slate and I had McKinnon, and I thought, man, like I'm probably going to coast to like a first down. It wasn't one of the huge ones, but it's just I like to play the single entry ones, and McKinnon looked bad on 2 drives, and man, they just went to Hasty, and they stuck with him. And so I think last week, you got Wilson back and they went with him. That's the only thing that makes you question it, right? I mean, Wilson had been out, Hasty had looked good, and then last week Hasty barely gets anything.
Yeah.
But versus McKinnon, I could see Hasty getting it. Here's what I think, Drake. They're going to let both guys play early, and whoever looks better is going to stay in the game. Because remember, this happened with Jerick McKinnon like 4 or 5 weeks ago, whenever he came out, and we thought, oh, Jeff Wilson, will be involved. And remember that one game where he literally just took everything. It was the same kind of thing, and Wilson hardly got anything. So I think truly Shanahan is on this hot hand approach. So you're playing with fire, starting any one of these guys. The good news is if you hit, like you see what a hit looks like. If you hit on the guy that gets all the work, you're going to feel good about, playing Hasty. Here's the one problem, though. I mean, they are playing the Seahawks. They got to keep the game close early. They can't, fall too far behind. If that's the case, you're going to see a lot more McKinnon.
It's a shootout city
there. Yeah, and so that worries me a little bit. that if for some reason, say the 49ers have a turnover early, and they get down by 10, what does that do? And I expect the 49ers to score plenty of points. We just need them to it needs to be basically, they need to score for every Seattle score. They never want to fall behind by, 2 scores.
And now they're down Deebo Samuel, and we'll get to that a little later. How about the Jets? They still play football. LaMichael Pirine looked like he stepped out of Frank Gore's shadow. He finishes a top 20 PPR running back this week. All right, the team sucks. We know, we get it, but they're still playing offense, and anybody who's putting up 70% of the snaps is going to be on our radar. And also, while we're there, how about we talk about Denzel Mims getting an insane target share?
Yeah, I mean, nobody's going to like owning, offensive weapons for the Jets. But at the same time, it's like you said, I mean, P. Ryan took over. He was in the utilization column this week. He was also in it last week. It was really his first call out about, his role was starting to ascend. And there was a potential for him to do more. He's basically splitting the carries with Frank Gore, but he gets all the long down and distance snaps. He gets all of the 2-minute offense snaps. So essentially, if you play for a team that's going to be behind all the time, that's the back that's going to get more of the work. So he's a nice fill-in. You're basically going to be doing, if you get a touchdown out of him, like that's like pure, like icing on the cake because you're just not expecting it, right? Yeah. You're just looking for a guy that could give you, maybe 50 yards rushing, 40 to 50 yards rushing, catches 4 to 5 balls for, 20, 30 yards. He gives you 10, 12 points. If all of a sudden he scores a touchdown on top of that, like you're going to do cartwheels. Yeah.
I mean, you might be trying to roll out some bad running backs like Ezekiel Elliott this week. And you've got to find somebody to fill in for him. And so let's go to my next segment here I've got for us, Dwain, is running backs in situations around the league that we have on our rosters already, but they could be causing us some major anxiety. And I'm going to start in Dallas with Ezekiel Elliott. The offensive line is just so banged up. I think they're going to get with their center back this week, but I mean, holy moly, this offense looks like hot garbage. You've got Ben DiNucci, who's probably going to take the reins against an Eagles stout run defense on Sunday night. I have no confidence he can get the ball to any of those weapons. So you're Mr. Cowboys, just got to break down this whole team. What do you do with any Dallas skill player?
Yeah, I mean, you hate to overreact, Drake, to any situation, but I mean, I've been living with this, for the season.
Dwayne took his glasses off for you folks listening on the podcast.
I don't want anything to do with this offense, period. Like I own a ton of CD Lamb, and that's over. I don't want him I've got him benched everywhere, and I got people on buys. Like I'm not going to use CD Lamb much more this year. Now they could change my mind, but to me, like the coaches have got to do something different. They're going to have to do some things schematically that this coaching staff doesn't do. Like they need to do some of the things like what you see Kyle Shanahan do for his quarterback, like you see Sean McVay do for Jared Goff. But that's not the style, right, of Kellen Moore. It's not the style of Mike McCarthy. But you know what? They need to adapt. And I don't care if the players only know this other playbook. It doesn't matter. You have to make this change. And I don't have the confidence that they're going to change the offense. They need to do something to fool defenses to keep them from just loading the box up, and you don't even have to load the box up against Dallas. You could almost play like almost max coverage and still get pressure every single play. I mean, we talked about this some last week. So, yeah, I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want to play Amari Cooper. I don't want to play Michael Gallup's droppable. CD Lamb, belongs on the end of your bench, and Ezekiel Elliott, is a bottom end running back 1 for the rest of the season for me. And it's only because of his volume, but the thing with Zeke that we always loved, Drake, beyond his volume is you always knew that with that offensive line, with that offense, it would never surprise us if all of a sudden we were like, wow, Zeke scored 17 touchdowns this year. He scored 15 touchdowns. That was always in his range of outcomes. Well, now it's like for the rest of the season, what's the over-under on how many touchdowns Zeke's going to score? 6 for the rest of the season? I mean, you maybe get 1 every other week. I just, if I had more confidence in the coaching staff to adapt, because they will eventually get Dalton back, and they could turn some things around, but the team just doesn't seem very interested in playing for Mike McCarthy. And like I said, things could change, but if I can move Amari Cooper, I am. If I can move CeeDee Lamb, I am. If I can move Ezekiel Elliott, I am. Thank God in my Dynasty League, which he's still fine in Dynasty. I moved him like 2 weeks ago, and I got, a decent, return on him. I don't know if I could get it, now, the same return. But I don't want any part of it, man. I want zero part of it.
We got a lot of guys in the chat here, and I know you guys ask a bazillion questions. We can't get to every single one, but we always, we try to get to some throughout the show, here and there. So if we don't get to it right away, we'll try at some point. But I know a lot of you guys are asking questions about, for instance, who can player X from the Cowboys be traded for? I mean, that's the one nice thing is these guys all have names, and maybe there's people out there who haven't seen the Cowboys the last 2 weeks, and you can move it. Like I just traded CeeDee Lamb to a guy in my league for Ryan Tannehill. So maybe he didn't see these games. People don't know what's going on in Dallas. But I mean, if you ask me, and we get a lot of trade questions on Twitter at FF Hustle, who am I getting? I mean, I'm just looking for something comparable, somebody I can start. If I'm saying, hey, I want to trade Amari Cooper, give me a wide receiver 2 that I can play. If I can get Tyler Boyd for him or something, see ya.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, you got to find the right trade partner. Like the cool thing about Zeke is you can probably still get 2 good players back, right? Yeah. So you could go offer up Zeke probably, for like a Josh Jacobs or, heck, a James Robinson who's really scored as many points as Zeke, and his arrow looks up versus down. Now he's on bye week this week, so remember that. And then you could probably turn around and get like a wide receiver 2 with him, to a team that really needs a running back. I think you could make that kind of deal with Zeke. And I would encourage you guys that own him, look, if all of a sudden the Cowboys turn things around, like it's a mistake I'm just willing to live with, and you guys can be mad at me, but I just don't see how, Drake. I don't see how the Cowboys turn this season around. It seems impossible to me.
Yeah, and I'll give you guys my own personal experience. I own Zeke in a league with a bunch of my buddies, and I had a guy send me an offer last night. He goes, I'll give you Devon Singletary and your choice of Adam Thielen or Will Fuller. And I already own Zach Moss. Like, I don't want Devon Singletary, so I turned the trade down. But, I mean, that's kind of what you're looking at. I mean, that's a really
trade
nice...
Zeke almost straight up for Adam Thielen right now. Seriously.
Yeah.
Like, Adam Thielen, man, like, as long as he stays healthy, I mean, he's top 6, top 8 wide receiver, the rest of the way. It wouldn't surprise any of us if he's in the top 3.
Well, we just mentioned Devon Singletary, so let's transition to Buffalo, where Zach Moss is back, baby, and he's back in a big way. Or at least it's a very annoying way for you Devon Singletary owners. Moss played 47% of the snaps on Sunday, and Singletary ended with his season low in snaps and carries. So that's got to be very concerning to you Singletary owners. Again, Josh Allen, we say it every week, he's the goal line back. Maybe you don't want to own any of these Buffalo backs, but if you do, I mean, the monkey wrench has been thrown in, and thy name be Zach Moss.
Yeah, I mean, the best option is to steer clear. But if I'm looking at one of these guys that I want to stash, it's Moss, because I feel like we've seen Singletary. He's had a chance, right? He could have really just killed it over those few weeks and probably limited what Zach Moss could be. Because really, to your point, Josh Allen is like the RB3, and he's going to get a lot of the goal line work. You can really only afford to have, one other back, to show value. If you got 2 backs plus Josh Allen, well, now you're just a huge RBBC like what we see, with the Patriots. So I don't really want to play any of these guys, between Moss and Singletary right now. But if I'm going to own one and I'm going to roster one, or I want to buy low on one, it's Moss, because I think we could still, if someone else is getting the carries inside the 5, it's him.
Yep. And
even though Singletary's getting the 2-minute drill work and all that kind of stuff, Moss is capable of all that. So the way I look at it is Moss is capable of things that Singletary's not. And the same's not true the other way, right? Like Moss can work in the receiving game. Moss can pass block. Moss can get tough yards. Moss can give you an occasional big play. Singletary's much more of a scat back. I feel like his skill set's much more limited. So I would place my chip, on Moss.
My mom's a big Buffalo Bills fan, and it is her birthday today. So happy birthday to Mama Drake out there.
Happy birthday. Is she part of Bills Mafia? Does she hate us?
She listens to the show. She's probably, the one person listening from my Facebook feed right now. I'll get a text about it later. But let's keep it rolling here. So everybody was worried, Dwain. Well, maybe not as worried week 1, but people are worried if they owned Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Le'Veon Bell's coming to town. So give us the breakdown. How did it look? CEH, owners, are they losing their mind? What can we expect going forward here? And what did you see this weekend?
I don't think we know enough yet, to be honest. I think Le'Veon Bell, number one, was limited to a set of plays that they felt comfortable with for him. And so they were only able to put him in the game, in those situations. In the first half, here's the positive for you, Clyde Edwards-Helaire owners. In the first half, Edwards-Helaire outsnapped, Le'Veon Bell. Like it was over 2-1. I would have to go back and look. I wrote about it in the article. You guys go read the article. But in the second half, it was a little closer. But at the same time, this was a game where, the Chiefs got up by a good bit. I mean, DeAndre Washington got in at the end of the game and got some trash time. So they didn't want to risk Bell there. I think we're going to need a different game script, Drake, which we probably won't get this week because it'll be the Jets. But a lot of people were, oh my God, CEH had his lowest carries of the season. I think that was more to do with the game script than Bell. One interesting thing, and this could be because Le'Veon Bell's not ready yet, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire actually saw his highest utilization in long down and distance for the season this week, with Darrell Williams being a non-factor, even though Williams was active. So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen here? My guess is still about half the carries to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He'll stick around 10% of the targets, Drake, and then you're going to see Le'Veon Bell get 30 to 40% of the carries and probably 5 to 8% of the targets. And I think that's probably where it ends up. But the Chiefs could do something a little different. Maybe they're going to use Edwards-Helaire more in the passing game, and they want Le'Veon Bell to be more of a closer and get more attempts. I mean, we're going to have to wait and see. The bottom line is Edwards-Helaire's best games are most likely behind us. Like this is just Le'Veon Bell's gonna limit him in some way, shape, or form more than what Darrell Williams did. Yep. I mean, I just don't think there's any way around it. Even if Le'Veon Bell's not what he used to be, and we're not saying that he's elite anymore, but I think it's problematic. I mean, the good news is you're dealing with a back that's on maybe the best offense in the entire league behind Seattle. And they could challenge to be number one any week, or maybe even for the rest of the season. So you always want to own players and explosive offenses. So you still have that going for you.
Josh Jacobs played 2 snaps in the fourth quarter. To quote early 2000s wrestling star Hurricane Helms, Dwain, what's up with that?
The Raiders imploded. That game was only a 4-point game, and to begin the fourth quarter, they had 2 turnovers inside their own 35. And so, I mean, the Bucs were able to capitalize on both of those, score touchdowns, and essentially right away, while you were going into a really close game to begin the fourth quarter, within a few minutes, the game was over. And so Jalen Richard came in, picked up some junk time. Devontae Booker picked up some junk time. Josh Jacobs was on pace for his normal 65% of snaps, his normal rushing workload. You guys, if you listen to the show, his passing workload is much more limited than even what his targets show, his utilization anyway. But he'll be back to his normal self, last week. That was just a really crazy situation that the Raiders went through this swing of crazy events that literally led to a blowout, and within like 5 minutes in the fourth quarter.
Guys, don't look now. Don't look. Okay, look. Leonard Washington. That was a slip there. If you're all you Chappelle Show fans, Leonard Fournette is back. 11. This pumpkin is strong. I sent some of this to Silva and Daigle a few weeks ago, and they enjoyed it before one of their shows. Holy moly! I'm already slurring words here and missing names, but so Leonard Fournette.
Look at you sending. Always gifting. Always.
They paid me for it, so. So thank you to our friend from Roto World, John Daigle, and one of Dwayne's many bosses, Evan Silva, for pounding some pumpkin. So let's talk Leonard Fournette here. 11 rushes, 7 targets, and he outsnapped Rojo in the first half. I completely stole that from your article on PFF. So what's your outlook on this backfield going forward?
I think it's still a bit unknown. I think they're both RB3s for me right now. Rojo started off the game. The first 2 drives, the Bucks came out. They're going under center. They're using their heavy sets. They're running the ball like they've done multiple times this season. Then in the second quarter, they kind of threw a curveball and used something that we haven't seen all year. They went to 10 personnel on 14 snaps. All 14 of those plays, which were all in hurry up, old school Brady, right? Hurry up, down the field. All of those snaps went to Leonard Fournette. Wow. And so that was a huge boost for Fournette. And it wasn't that Rojo was necessarily – look, and you guys know I'm over Rojo, but like Rojo wasn't necessarily playing bad. He had some nice carries, even, on that second drive. He even got a carry inside the 10. Now they still aren't giving him any passing work, any long down and distant work, no 2-minute. He's still completely allergic to that, or the coaches are allergic to him. So if I had to own one though, Drake, I'm going to lean Fournette. And the reason why is just because, especially in PPR, he's going to be more involved in the passing game. And LaShawn McCoy was a ghost. So it really was a two-person.
He's still on the team?
Yeah, he's still on the team. But it was really all of that went to Fournette. So now what you have is essentially Fournette probably won't lead the team in carries every week. That will be Rojo. And this weekend will still be a good spot start for Rojo because you're going to get the Giants. And because some people looked at it and they're like, well, wow, the Bucks blew out the Raiders. Rojo should have had more carries in a blowout. Well, the blowout, like I just told you guys, it didn't happen until the very end of the game. Had that happened, in the early third quarter, you probably would have seen Rojo tack on another 10 to 12 carries. I think he's still going to be the guy to get, 55% or so of the carries. Fournette will get about 45%, but Fournette's going to be much more involved in the passing game. Fournette's going to be involved in the 2-minute offense, and he's going to be the guy that likely sees more of the work inside the 5. So that makes Fournette the guy that I want to own more. And he had a big run, so I think he could continue to press into Rojo. But I think Jones has shown enough, Drake, as much as we may hate on him, and we're not hating on him, we're hating on his situation and the way he gets used.
Yeah.
But as much as we've talked about his issues, we've also admitted that he looks good running the ball, and I think he's done enough to keep some of the early down work. And so I don't think Fournette completely takes over the backfield like we may have once thought. Now, Rojo could change that. He could screw up, play bad, turnover. I think Fournette's the better asset to own for the rest of the season.
We're talking Tampa Bay here, and you're listening to the Fantasy Football Hustle. Dwain McFarland, Brian Drake, thanks everybody for joining us. Let's just keep it going here, and we're still in the running back spot, but hey, we're talking Tampa Bay, and the big news of the week was Antonio Brown signing with the Bucks. Is Antonio Brown an asshole? Yes, he is. Is he a scumbag and done scumbag things? Absolutely, without question. Is he going to kick fantasy ass this season? My opinion, without question. He runs the routes Brady likes to throw to. Mike Evans is a ghost. You got Godwin already missing a game this week with a bad hand. He can't play till week 9. So you're going to get some Scotty Miller talk this week and whatever, and Gronk's coming on. But I want your thoughts, Dwayne. What do we expect from this Tampa attack going forward? I think if Brown plays all season, this guy's a wide receiver 2.
Yeah, I think he's wide receiver 3, but I mean, I'm not going to argue with wide receiver 2. I think what you're going to see is it's going to be spread around, dude, just like it is now. I mean, they're not funneling to anybody, I mean, it's pretty much spread around very evenly. The player that gets the most targets for the week, gets to 18 or 20% of the targets. Nobody's getting 30%. Antonio Brown's not going to either. Now, Brown's a really good player. We'll see where he's at. He's explosive. He can make big plays. So he's going to have value, but I don't expect him to come in and all of a sudden be a target hog. It's going to take him a little bit to get acclimated. I mean, look at Gronk. I mean, it's taken him, 5 weeks, 6 weeks before he really got going. And now he's looking kind of like a tight end 1. But again, even him, he's not getting 30% of the targets. Brady's going to take the ball. He's going to give it to the guy that's got the best matchup. And he's just going to continue to do that. Now, to your point, he does like the inside routes. He does like the intermediate and the shorter routes. He's not into taking big risk, if he doesn't have to, which is hurting, Mike Evans, because inherently playing on the outside, you're typically facing, on a lot of your routes, you've got two guys in coverage versus you. And he's the guy that the other team is basically saying we're taking away. Mike Evans is still really their best player, but other teams are basically saying we're not going to let you go to him. Now Brown and some other guys could force that to go a different way, and then all of a sudden Evans is going to be really valuable, down the stretch. So I think you hit it on the head. I think I've got him as a wide receiver 3. I think a wide receiver 2, is probably a bit rich for me, but again, I'm not going to argue with it. I could totally see it.
He's going to be vet, but he's a guy, if you own him, you're going to be starting him. Let's just say that. He's not like some bum on your bench. He's not LaVisca Chenault or somebody, like that, where you're just like, whatever, they're on my roster, who cares?
Yeah, there's a lot of players, though, like I'd still rather own over him, that people probably may even have on their benches, in some of these smaller leagues. Like, I'm still fine with T. Higgins versus him. I'm still fine with Justin Jefferson for sure. But, I mean, I think he's going to be down in the range with those types. I think, you're talking Brandon Cooks, T. Higgins, DJ Chark, maybe the DJ Moore, and we'll see if Robbie Anderson keeps this up, maybe creeps up towards the Cooper Kupp range, which hasn't been that great this year, but I mean, probably fits somewhere, in there, Drake. And most of those guys all have one thing in common. There's multiple weapons on the team. None of them get all of it, or they've got something else that limits their volume. A run-heavy offense, a slow-moving offense, something, right, that keeps them, from seeing that 10 to 12 targets, per week that we see from our true elites, at the very top.
You mentioned Cooper Kupp, and this is a perfect time for me to segue into a question for you and the folks here in our chat. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. If you're on YouTube and you're watching this, leave a comment about it if this happened in your league. So, Dwain, I'm a commissioner of the Alcoholic Haze. The trophy for it is sitting right behind me. It's a bunch of buddies that have played in this league for 20 years now from college. So a guy was playing, and on his roster, he had his receivers all were either hurt, on bye, whatever. He had only 3 receivers to play, one of them being Jamison Crowder. As the week went on, we realized Crowder would not play. I've sent this guy multiple offers, said, hey, by the way, Crowder ain't going to play, yada, yada, yada. Didn't want to trade, said, nope, I'm going to do my own thing. I'll figure it out. He does nothing, adds nobody, leaves the spot empty. We head into Monday night. He and his opponent, Dwain, are tied. They both have like 111 points. His opponent has Cooper Kupp. He has an empty spot. Here come the fireworks from the fantasy league. Buddy, you got to put somebody in. You can't give away a free W because you don't want to drop. He had guys on his bench. He could drop T.Y. Hilton, Noah Fant, guys like that. We have 6-man benches. There's room to drop somebody. So I want your thoughts. Eventually, I think we bullied him into dropping T.Y. Hilton, and guess who he picked up?
Who?
Josh Reynolds. Guess who won him the week? Josh Reynolds.
So here's my thought on that. You know your league mates, but I have had a week in my dynasty league, which is really deep, where I had a situation similar to that, and this is me. And now it is dynasty, so that changes things a little bit because you drop a guy, you may never get him, like ever, like in your life again. Where I did that, I went a player short because I did it for my long-term strategy. Because I didn't want to give up a player, and I could see that coming into play even in season long, but it depends on the situation. Is he, a team that's really crappy and you think he's just doing it because, he's lazy and doesn't want to do anything, or is he a competitive?
Put him in first place.
Huh?
The win put him into first place.
Well, right, great. But if I can finish in second place and I keep T.Y. Hilton, who I think is 5x better than Josh Reynolds, then I think that should be his choice.
But don't you think
that's me.
Giving up the win, like wins are hard to come by in fantasy, and everyone's got money on the table. If you were down 30, I wouldn't have cared if you didn't play anybody. But you're tied going into Monday night. You have an opportunity to win, And there's other guys. This affects everybody else because you're giving somebody a free W.
But the drop of T.Y. Hilton, I would argue the drop of T.Y. Hilton could affect the league more. What if T.Y. Hilton really shouldn't be on waivers. If T.Y. Hilton comes back and is all of a sudden a wide receiver 2 the rest of the year, and he goes to, say, the team that's in second place now, and all of a sudden that makes him a first place team, or to a team that's in fourth, that's a much more lasting impact than 1 week, in my opinion. Now, again, I've seen people do it out of laziness, and I think, that sucks. Like, get your shit together, handle your business. But I think if you're strategically doing it because you literally don't have someone you want to drop, and you're looking at the wire and it's like, oh, I got to do it for Josh Reynolds type thing, I don't think they should be bullied into doing it. That's just me.
All right. Let's hit a few questions here before we transition to wide receiver. Our buddy Axel Jansen, Dwain, what's the value of David Montgomery?
Nothing. Man, look, Montgomery's getting all the utilization, but I'm done. I've seen enough. I've watched him a couple of times now. Last night, got to see him a lot. Drake, the things that, he won with in college, right? The shake and bake, make you miss. Like, he's too slow for that in this league. His foot speed is too slow. His moves that used to look fast, look lethargic, and people just get him by his legs and his feet like it's no problem. He seems to be like maybe the easiest person in the whole league to tackle, like when you're watching it. And he over jumps, he jump cuts past holes. He's not a north and south guy. He really just needs to change into that, and he doesn't have breakaway speed. He's the only thing he has going for him is volume, which we care about here and we love. But this offense is so anemic right now with the quarterback situation, man. Look, and I own Montgomery in a couple of spots, and I get it. Sometimes you got to keep him in your lineup, especially in, some of these deeper formats, but I don't like it, and if he happens to all of a sudden go off for 2 touchdowns one of these weeks, and I can move him, unless we're watching him and being like, wow, this is a new person, which I just don't see how that's going to happen at this point. I'm going to try to sell high.
Shirley Shapiro asks, can you rank rest of season in a standard league Antonio Gibson, Leonard Fournette, and Justin Jackson?
I think you've got it in the right order already. You could make an argument that Fournette, because he's in a better offense, should be over Gibson, and I would be fine with that. Those two are really close, but I think it's in the right order. And Jackson is Justin Jackson, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Justin Jackson's for sure the third, right, of that trio. What are your thoughts, Drake?
I agree. Justin Jackson, boy, you would have thought a week ago, hey, he's kind of taken the lead in this backfield for the next 6-7 weeks while Eckler's out. But then Joshua Kelly ends up outpacing him the whole way, actually catches 5 balls also. So it's a mess. I mean, who knows with that Chargers team, but boy, oh boy, does that Herbert kid look good. The
answer to Timothy Chan, should I trade Fulgham and Swift for Crowder? No way. I think essentially right now in Fulgham, you have Crowder. I mean, it's a guy that's not on a great team, but he's going to see 10 targets every week.
Whoa.
Swift has huge upside.
How about my guy Corey Richmond? Here's a trade. Thoughts on Allen Robinson, Boston Scott, and Miles Sanders for Peterson and Kelsey?
I see Allen Robinson. Oh, so it's Allen Robinson and both Eagles running backs for Peterson and Kelsey.
Yeah, I'm doing that in a second.
I'm not doing it for Adrian Peterson.
If I'm getting Robinson, I want the Robinson Scott Sanders side.
Yeah, I do too. So which side is he?
I don't know.
I think Corey, you asked a question last week too, where we weren't sure which side you were.
Hey, look,
I'm with you. I want the Robinson Eagles side. I thought you were saying Kelsey. I was like, dude, Drake, like you are drunk.
Hey, look, the fantasy football counselor is in here. Somebody posted, want to become famous, buy followers and views, and they put a link. Hey, thanks for following, man. Thanks for checking us out. So thanks for the guys in the chat also who blew him up, started yelling at him. Let's see.
Is that what that was about? I was like, I saw somebody saying, get out of here. We're trying to do something. And I didn't even know. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. That's funny.
Alec Hyde, who has a super professional Facebook or YouTube photo. Wow. We don't even have nice photos like that. Should I trade Mike Williams and Justin Jefferson for Mike Evans and Le'Veon Bell?
No, man. No, I'm not.
No, you want Jefferson and Bell, or Jefferson and Williams, excuse me. That's the side you want to be on.
Yep.
All right, we're getting into wide receivers here. Is Sterling Shepard legit?
Are the New York Giants legit? No. Look, again, it all depends on your league size. If you're in a PPR, here's the nice thing with Sterling Shepard this last week, Drake. He didn't just operate from the slot. He actually took over the Z spot, and it was, Golden Tate only getting on the field in 11 personnel. So Shepard was out there for pretty much, he was out there the second most to Slayton. And he's working that short intermediate area of the field. He has shown somewhat of a connection at some points in time last year with Daniel Jones. They need Daniel Jones to get going. And Daniel Jones did have his best week, of the season this last week. It wasn't great, but he definitely showed some signs of life. And so I think if you're in a really deep format, Sterling Shepard is a guy that you're fine plugging in on your bye weeks. Maybe they get going a little bit, but I don't see him being a guy that changes your season.
We're getting a couple of guys in the chat room asking about this, so I'll kind of combine it here. Our guy Corey again asked about the value of Michael Pittman, who was lost early in the season, but if you look at Roto World, they say he's looking at a Week 8 return. And Con Peterson asked, can you talk about the Colts wide receivers and who do you like most based on utilization and opportunity? I mean, they've got Marcus Johnson who's doing some things. We just talked a little T.Y. Hilton. So what do you think about the Colts?
Yeah, I think it's a situation where Hilton's still the one, and we've seen that, over the last few weeks. It hadn't necessarily turned into really big, production, for T.Y. Hilton.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also it's not a team that it's another team that likes to be balanced, like what we talked about earlier with the Bucs. They really want to spread the ball around, quite a bit. So there's not anyone, Drake, that I get, too excited, about. But looking at Marcus Johnson, 73% of the routes, 18%, of the targets. He saw what's nice, right, is the 20-yard ADOT, so he had 141 air yards the last time out. So I think he's definitely a guy that you can take a flyer on. And he's flashed a little bit before. I talked about him last week in the utilization reports that, hey, you got to let the bye week get by. But he's the one right now. Now, Zach Pascal's technically, playing more than him. He's out there for 94% of the routes. But my concern with Pascal is that he's the odd man out when Pittman gets back, or that turns into a rotation. I think Johnson is the guy that really right now is getting more of the work that Paris Campbell, left behind.
Let me clean up a few running back things before we go to wide receiver again. Don't sleep on Wayne Gallman. We saw what he did. He looked like he had so much more juice than Devonta Freeman. It's a Thursday night game, so a lot of guys forget about that. So I just wanted to throw that one out there. As we move to wide receiver, we talked about Antonio Brown. How about in Cleveland, where OBJ is donezo with the ACL tear? That leaves Jarvis Landry, who's battling more ailments than your grandmother, and Rashard Hollywood Higgins as the wide receivers of note in Cleveland. Now, I think on the waiver wire, you can do a lot worse than Higgins. So I'd love to hear your outlook on this passing game going forward without Beckham Jr. And also you can touch on Harrison Bryant, who filled in for Austin Hooper and scored a pair of touchdowns. Really good looking rookie.
Yeah. With Beckham out, he was the alpha. He was getting, 28, 30% of the targets every week. Now, it's not a pass-heavy offense, but it's a very efficient offense when Baker's on the mark, right? Because the play action sets everything up. So the good news for Rashard Higgins is he's going to step right into that X role, which, we could list receivers from here to eternity almost of X receivers that have had, some good moments in this particular offense. Due to, the mismatches that it creates for you and the space that it creates for yards after the catch. And I think Higgins is equipped to do that. He can also stretch the field. So he's going to see plenty of play action looks. I would say probably 40% of his targets will probably be on play action, which will be one of the best in the league. He's not going to be a target hog the way Beckham was, but I think Drake, 5 to 7 targets, per week could be doable. Sure. He's probably going to help. He's probably going to be a boom bust wide receiver 3 type, but he could push for more. And he has big play upside, so I'm absolutely, interested in Higgins this week on the wire. I'm not going to go dump, 30% of my fab on the guy or anything, but he is a talented player. He and Baker Mayfield have shown in the past, right, that they have chemistry, and this is an offense that creates big plays for that position. So I think you put all those things together, and you have to think that, right, he's right there on that wide receiver 3 cusp, and he could surprise us and do a little bit more. I think Jarvis Landry will ultimately, as he gets healthier, be more integrated into the offense. We didn't see it, completely last week, even though he did, post his highest, percentage of snaps, routes, and even targets, for the season. It didn't necessarily turn up in the box score. So I actually think Landry might be a buy low, Drake, right now. And you can buy really low. So it's not like, you can you probably, you guys can figure out what it would take, but I'm pretty sure that Jarvis Landry is there to be had if anybody really wants him. Don't go overpay, but I think that Landry is probably, would it surprise us if he really turned into the guy seeing, 7 to 9 targets a week, like OBJ was? I think that's the most likely scenario. And that doesn't mean Higgins can't have value, because, he's going to play that role where he's probably going to get, more of the big plays. But Landry's shown us in the past, Drake, that he can work further down the field. He's not a deep threat per se, but he can work the intermediate areas. He can work off of play action as well. And to your point around the tight ends, the tight ends have picked up for Cleveland over the last 3 weeks. And it really started with Austin Hooper the 2 weeks before this last week with Harrison Bryant. He was in the conversation for tight end 1 and was really, coming on. And then he had the appendectomy. And so if Austin Hooper's been dropped and you are in, a medium to large size format and you're really hurting at tight end, even if now you got to look at your bye weeks and everything, but he's a really good stash. He will return to being the tight end 1 when he's back. But I think what we've seen with Harrison Bryant, like dynasty owners, if you own him, you've got to be excited. If somehow, after this kind of subsides and people forget about this week when Hooper's back, just file that away. See if you can go, make a return visit to that and see if that's a player that you can move, from one of your league mates in dynasty formats.
Yeah, and Njoku's gone after this season too. Boy, I don't know why, but when we posted our draft video on Brandon Ayuk, it was the most popular one we did. And now, guess what? This uber talented, explosive rookie is the wide receiver 1 in San Francisco because Deebo Samuel came back and then he went back out. So it's George Kittle and it's Brandon Ayuk competing for targets here. Oh, hey, they play Seattle's trash secondary this week. So Brandon Ayuk, if he's on the waiver wire, could be super valuable as a plug-and-play option.
Yeah, there's really not a whole bunch more to say, but it's similar to what we just talked about with the Browns. Very similar offense, but even more creative with Shanahan. You'll see a ton of play action, Drake. They create a lot of looks for you on screen plays. The new thing over the last 2 years, have you ever seen cheaper passing yards than these handoffs that are turned into passes, where they pitch it to the receiver in front? But it's great, right? It's a PPR point. It helps the quarterback's passing yards. I think everybody wins from a fantasy perspective, but I guess the reason they do it is because if it gets dropped, it's not a fumble, right? It's an incomplete pass. So there's like the strategic component, but Ayuk's going to get all those sort of looks. He gets reverses, So yeah, I think he's going to see 20 to 30% of the targets each week. Kittle's obviously the one, but Ayuk has shown also, Drake, that he's talented. He's played well. He's played well for a rookie, and we could just see him, continue to, operate, in a situation where if Deebo continues to battle, injuries all the rest of the season and he develops, more rapport with Garoppolo, who knows? Maybe he ends up sticking as the second option, and Deebo becomes the third option. With Deebo, this is kind of getting, to a point where it's like, okay, can he stay healthy, this season?
A team that uses their wide receivers in a very similar way is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, Dwain, let's talk about their wide receiver group. We finally had a game with Claypool, Juju, and Deontay all healthy, at least to start. So Juju, who was left for dead by many in this industry, turned 14 targets into 9 for 85. Deontay Johnson, back out there running at the X, found himself 15 targets and scored twice. And everyone's All-American Chase Claypool saw 1 lonely target, for -2 yards. So people now are going to be all super down on Claypool. Deontay got hurt. We don't know if he's going to miss some time or what's going to happen here, but there's going to be a lot of folks who busted their nut in fab on Claypool 2 weeks ago, and now they're like, what the hell, Dwain? You said this guy was a stud, and now he's, getting negative points for me here. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this Steelers group.
He is a stud, and when people in your league drop him, go pick him up. I mean, I would double down. Look, we talked about this, actually, when we talked about Claypool being a stud, that there's still going to be weeks because when they're all healthy, there's a lot of mouths to feed here. But here's the bottom line. I mean, Claypool's, his routes, even this last week with Deontay Johnson back, 37. That's the same as Cooper Kupp. He's on the field plenty. The team's top corner, anytime he lined up outside, went to Claypool. That's what happened, even though it was the Titans. So it's like, who is their top corner? Is he even really a top corner? But that just meant Ben, very similar to Brady, which we talked about earlier, was just going to go to the other area. So Claypool's going to, you saw them try to get him involved, with the same kind of little pitch pass that we talked about, just a minute ago. He's getting to line up, plenty still in the slot, 38% this past week. His routes, his snaps, all of that are fine. He gets all of the 22 personnel looks. So when they come out in this kind of jumbo package down inside the 5 and 10, like he's out there, nobody else is. Juju's off the field, Deontay's off the field. When they're in 11 personnel, he's getting the majority of that work. And, James Washington continues to kind of just fade more and more into the background. I think Claypool's going to be fine, but you just have to live with some of these weeks. We talked about the fact that he could turn into a boom bust, but he should be rostered everywhere still.
Mm-hmm. Could be a buy low. People are kind of, pissed at him a little bit. So we talked about Dallas. Let's move on to the other
while
side.
You're on Dallas, you got Eric Hutchinson in the chat. Lamb or Higgins rest of season? Higgins, easy.
Yeah.
Move on from Lamb right now while you can. Doesn't mean Lamb's bad in Dynasty, so don't take it that way. Lamb's still a fabulous player. Everything we thought that was going to happen with him did. He got the best matchups. I mean, I remember getting roasted about, Mike Gallup is going to be, and I remember that. Everybody thought it was Gallup, and we were the one show that said, nope, it's going to be Lamb. And it all just comes back to the way they play football, the scheme, the matchups he was going to see, and what we thought Gallup's role was going to be, which was field stretcher. And guess what? Like, all of that was right. And so it'll be back next year, for CD Lamb. Great things still to come. But right now, I would easily take T. Higgins over CD Lamb.
Let me hit a couple of receiver questions because it'll help us talk about team utilization here. Brandon asks, thoughts on the Saints wide receiver core if Michael Thomas doesn't make it back? But what a mess here with Michael Thomas. And, they've got some kind of real rando dudes who are popping up and making plays. And we've got Emmanuel Sanders now on the COVID list. You've got Traquan Smith. And what's the kid's name? It escapes me right now.
Callaway
popped off this week. Anything with these guys?
So Traquan is playing Michael Thomas's role. Callaway's playing Emmanuel Sanders' role. I don't think you can trust any of those guys right now. I think one of them will continue to probably play a decent role each week until the other guys get back healthy. But I think it's going to be hard to say which. But that's the Saints set up their offense a very specific way, and this is part of why they brought these players in. They're basically duplicates of the guys they have in the starting roles. They have very similar skill sets, even though they may not be as good as the other guys. The problem for them is they still need matchups. They need things to break their way to really be viable options. Whereas Emmanuel Sanders can win pretty much any way he wants. Michael Thomas, we all know what Michael Thomas can do, even though he's very aided by the system. Michael Thomas needs to really freaking chill out. Like, he is not like this super badass receiver. Like, he is a possession receiver who's very good at what he does, but he's in the best scheme he could ever hope for. This is one of those situations where these players the team is actually taking care of them. They, for whatever reason, get cross, with their coaching staff, and they get all high and mighty about it. And guess what? They regret this crap later in their career, because Michael Thomas is not the same if you ask him to just go play outside and go one-on-one with really good cornerbacks all the time. Michael Thomas isn't going to like that life.
Hashtag slant boy, man.
Yeah, he's still good. He's still a solid receiver, but he's not a top 6-8 talent just as a pure receiver that can do everything. He's a top 1 or 2 fantasy talent in his scheme that he's in, and that doesn't mean he's bad, but he's not a field stretcher. He's not a great separator. He's in a scheme that moves him around. He's great at catching the ball while taking contact inside. He's got okay run after the catch ability. He's got a great stiff arm. He's got a lot of positive things, right? I mean, he's a physical specimen, but he's not somebody, he's not on the level, right, of honestly, he's not on this level of Emmanuel Sanders. I know that sounds wrong, but Emmanuel Sanders can literally beat every coverage. Like, that's what I'm talking about. But, Thomas is not on the level of Julio Jones and, Devontae Adams and, Keenan Allen even. Like, he's not on their level.
Carlos asks, took a flyer on Preston Williams last waiver run to see how he does with Tua. Do you guys think the 2 young guys in Miami will click, or should I move on? I'll also throw in here to Dwain. Mike Gesicki came out and said that he ran all the scout team reps with Tua. So I think those guys have a pretty good rapport, and we all know my long, deep-seated hate of Mike Gesicki on the show. So as it could be a real sneaky play at tight end because he's getting dropped. He's available in a ton of leagues. So thoughts on this Miami offense with a new quarterback coming in?
I don't really want much to do with the Dolphins offense at this point. I'm not like dropping these guys, but it's not a good matchup really this weekend against the Rams. They're a tough matchup for quarterbacks. They're a tough matchup for receivers. Devontae Parker's banged up going in. Preston Williams' snaps and routes are up and down and up and down. So he's obviously battling something, or the coaches only like him in certain, spots. Gesicki is out there plenty, and he's a talented player. He just doesn't always get targeted. I think we just got to wait and see, man, what's going to happen with Tua. I would rather not have any of these players in my lineup this week, if I can avoid it. If I had to, and we see that Devontae practices all week, okay, because we pretty sure he's going to get the targets. If I'm really hurting at tight end, fine. I'll put, Gesicki in. I think Gesicki should be rostered, honestly, in most formats. Like, his utilization is all there. He's running plenty of routes. It's been pretty consistent. It's just that Fitzpatrick was locking on to some of the guys on the outside and just chunking it to them.
Yeah, there's 800 other random white guys who play tight end in Miami who catch touchdowns too.
Shaheen.
It's unbelievable. Hey, let's talk Raiders.
Another former great Bears pick. Like 2 or 3 years ago.
So, Dwain, in your PFF article, which everyone should go over to PFF or to Establish the Run and read Dwain's work and click on it 3 or 4 times and help my man, make a few bucks. So you said it's time to scoop up Henry Ruggs. So we'll talk about that. But there's another receiver in Vegas who could be worthy of an ad, and his name is Nelson Aguilar. The Duke of Drops has come to life in the desert. He scored 3 straight games. Sunday, he went over 100 yards. His yards per reception is 19.5. And with Brian Edwards out with a foot issue, Aguilar is running the X in that Gruden offense. What you think of these Vegas pass catchers?
He's playing with confidence, man. I'm definitely not going to put much money on Aguilar. I would prefer to have Higgins because I think Higgins is locked into his role for the season. Aguilar, once Brian Edwards is back, will they split time? Will Edwards take over? I don't know. But I will say, Aguilar has looked good. He's made some really good plays too. It's not just like he's running wide open. I've seen him make some tough catches. And Derek Carr, surprisingly just sneaking up, he's QB1, he's in that top 12 quarterback, range at this point. And, their offense seems to be clicking through the air and their defense is terrible. So that's always a good combination. As far as Ruggs goes, he saw season high in routes, season high in snaps, and, he's still just getting healthy. I think it's just a matter, of time because they're moving him all around. He's getting to play in the slot. He's seeing some targets underneath. He's seeing deep targets where he's getting to stretch the field. I want to say he's got 3 or 4 targets over 20 yards. You probably have my article up in front of you. Yeah, I think he has 3 or 4 targets over 20 yards in the last 2 weeks. There's going to be some air yards there. I just see him as being, the player outside of Waller that I probably want to own even over Aguilar, and I can get him for less, in most leagues where he's just sitting there.
Somebody asked a question, a trade involving a kicker. So I have to ask this to you, Dwain, even though I don't think it's a good trade at all. Hey guys, love the content. Should I trade away Godwin, Landry, and Hasty for Ridley, Will Lutz, and Keelan Cole?
All I see is you get Ridley. I'll tell you what, like it does depend on your roster, but you're getting the best player. And I mean, look, Godwin is good, and we love Godwin, but he can't stay on the field. And like we talked about earlier, they're going to spread the ball around. Ridley is actually in an offense where even though they do spread it around a bit, they run a ton of plays. And Ridley can win outside. He can win inside. Godwin's still a bit dependent on the matchup, where inside, when you're playing a team that runs a lot of zone, he's going to have a big week. If you're running it, against a team that's, playing against a lot of man, then that's where Evans and some of these other guys, and probably even that's where Antonio Brown, I think, is going to be big for them, is against man defense. I think that's going to be where he's going to pay off. So we'll talk more about that in the coming weeks, because I have some cool new data, Drake, that I'm working on from PFF around man and zone coverage and all this cool stuff. So we'll get into that more in the future. But I don't know, man. That's tough for me, Drake, because with OBJ being gone, I do think Landry's role increases. But here's what I'll say: if you have a deep roster, or you're playing you like your roster otherwise, or you're in a league that's really shallow where it's just about just stacking up as many studs as you can, then I would do it. I'd be willing to make the move. And it's not like Lutz and who else was it? Like we're just throw-ins. Like I just saw Ridley's name. Keelan Cole. Keelan Cole is who I'm assuming he meant by Cole.
I don't do the trade. I'd rather have Godwin and Landry and Hasty. If Hasty becomes a thing for a few weeks and you can play. I mean, literally.
He may for a week. Again, that's why I just said you got to look at your roster.
Mm-hmm.
Look, Calvin Ridley could be the wide receiver one the rest of the way. I mean, he's that good. You got Hopkins, you that Adams, you got Thielen, Julio. I mean, to me, Ridley's in the top 3 out of the group for sure. That's just my thoughts.
Brian from Syracuse asks, Dwain, should we do a halftime hustle Sunday night live stream to talk about the Eagles-Cowboys game?
Do you guys just want me to feel pain? I mean, I'll do it if that's what everybody wants. I'll be willing to log in. Usually at that time I'm writing. I've got my first run of the data for everything in the day, so I'm writing the article. But I don't mind taking, if we do a 15-minute halftime hustle, we could do that.
38 White Claws deep. We'll rock and roll. I'll have my face paint on. All right. Hey, I can answer this question. Is Cam washed? Yes.
No, he's not. He's not. But here's what is washed: the Patriots receiving core.
Oh, it's terrible.
And their game plan, everybody knows it. He
doesn't throw to the right side of the field. The OC said it today.
Well, I mean, yeah, when you have N'Keal Harry line up over there half the time, I mean, are you going to throw to the right side of the field? I mean, look, the receivers suck. The receivers are terrible.
I had better receivers on my Sigma Alpha Epsilon Greek Week team in 2001. I mean, it's abysmal. I had Cam. I dropped him and traded for another quarterback. You can't start him right now in fantasy football. If you have Cam Newton, I'm sorry. Like, the rushing is not going to help you enough. He's just going to give you 0 in the passing game. It's crazy.
Yeah, I agree with that. We've got to see more, from him. He started off great, but to your point, I mean, teams figure it out. We talk about this. They see the film and they're like, okay, great. Really, they don't have anybody. Demir Bird, who's that? Julian Edelman barely playing 60% of the snaps. N'Keal Harry, talk about washed. Like, he never even got out of the gate. That dude sucks.
He's still in the tub.
Yeah, he's still in the tub. Dalton Keene and who else?
Devon Asiasi.
They finally saw some work this weekend. Maybe they can bring some life. But I mean, the Patriots, if they want to have a chance, man, Drake, they need somebody that can stretch the field.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just have a bunch of underneath possession guys that don't really separate, when Cam is not hyper accurate. I mean, you need guys that he can still be accurate, but he needs to be able to get the ball to some people with a little bit of space so they can run. He's shown he can do that. He did that late in his last year in Carolina. They condensed the offense down, and they ran a lot more crossers. They still ran some deep stuff, but it wasn't all just throwing to big bodied receivers, which I think they hoped that's what N'Keal Harry would be. And he's just not, he's like a slot receiver, an overgrown slot receiver that can't separate.
Let me give you a trade question here from our friend Jacob on YouTube. So again, if you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe, help us out. It goes a long way here for the hustle. So Dwain, should I give up Derrick Henry for Tyreek Hill and Melvin Gordon? I have Gurley, Hunt, Jonathan Taylor, and we'll assume that's David Johnson at running back, Galladay, Chark, Jefferson at wide receiver. I'm probably not making the playoff, but the guy trading me is.
Man, I'm not making that move. I think Henry is by far the best player in that trade. Gurley is okay, but very inefficient. Hunt in probably 2 weeks goes back to being share time or, even less than share time. Chubb should be back around week 10. Jonathan Taylor hasn't shown us anything yet. I think that Henry's still the best player in the deal. I mean, Melvin Gordon kind of fits the mold of all the other guys we just talked about. I like Tyreek Hill, don't get me wrong, but I mean, you've got Galladay and Jefferson, and Chark. I think you're fine, in that situation. But I mean, I don't think it's the worst. Like, if you made the trade, I don't think anybody's going to yell at you and say, that's terrible. That I just personally wouldn't, make the move.
Let's talk about a few tight ends here before we call it a show. So if you're listening on iTunes, please subscribe, give us the 5-star rating. We appreciate it. Tell a friend to tell a friend. After all, this is still a podcast at heart. In Philadelphia, we've been telling everybody and their brother, go stash Dallas Goedert. But there's another tight end catching balls and making a fantasy name for himself, and that's Richard Rodgers. In place of Ertz and Goddard this past week, he shined, caught 6 balls for 85 yards. Now, for a team severely lacking passing targets, this guy's an instant plug-and-play option Sunday night against Dallas. Also, heads up, Jalen Reagor could be back in a week or so off IR. What are your thoughts on Dick Rodgers?
If you need, it's like you just hit it. Like if you need a 1-week filler,
yep,
you can do it. I think it's fine. You are playing the Cowboys. I don't think you're going to have to pass as much. I think we're going to see the Eagles get to run the ball more this week because they should be ahead by 21 within 4 minutes, of the game starting. So I don't know how much they're going to really have to pass.
From your lips to God's ears. Irv Smith, he's a Hustle Show favorite. He's caught 4 balls in each of his last 2 games coming off a bye. He's someone you're talking about in your articles. What are you feeling with our boy Irv?
Again, offense similar to what we talk about with Hooper. Not going to see a ton of targets, but it's going to be efficient. He's going to be in the 4 to 6 range. Any one of those, because he's such a good athlete, could be broken for a long gainer. He's always going to be involved. He has a chance to be much more involved, down inside, the 5, inside the 10-yard line. But he's just clearly past, Kyle Rudolph. So, I mean, you've got the Vikings have basically said, look, we keep losing these games. We're just going to go with firepower. We're going to run with Jefferson. We're going to run with Thielen, and we're going to run with Irv Smith, and they've just kind of said Olabisi Johnson and Kyle Rudolph and all these other scabs, like just, you guys can just chill out over here in the corner. We're going to let the young guys run. And that's what you're seeing. So I think Irv Smith is going to, be fringe tight end, top 12 tight end. He'll be a little frustrating, I think, at times. He's not going to ever be mistaken, many weeks for being their lead target. Like that could maybe happen one time and it'll be kind of fluky. I think he's the third option, maybe occasionally works into being second option on a team that really wants to run the ball first. But again, it's the efficiency.
So, folks, we're going to wrap it up right there. We've gone an hour and 15 minutes. Dwain did a podcast with Ian Hartitz for PFF just before this. So, I mean, we got to let the guy eat some dinner and catch his breath. So check that out if you're into even more Dwain podcasts. It's always a great show with Ian. And we thank you, everybody, very much for tuning in, checking us out, and getting me drunk off one pumpkin. Holy moly. So maybe we'll see you at halftime. Check things out. When it goes to the half, jump on Twitter, jump on YouTube, and maybe your friends from the Hustle will be here talking about the Sunday night affair. So for Dwain McFarland, I am Brian Drake. Enjoy the rest of your week 8 and never get out hustled. We'll see you, folks.